A lone rancher vanishes one silent night, leaving behind nothing but a cold wind and a locked cabin door. And when he finally returns, his eyes hold a truth that shakes every soul who hears it. He speaks of a hidden valley where he was taken by a fierce tribe of Apache women, warriors who moved like shadows and carried secrets older than the desert itself. He remembers the fear in his chest, the way their voices echoed through the darkness, and the moment he realized they did not want to harm him, they wanted something far deeper. He recalls faces filled with strength, sorrow, and unspoken stories, and he carries the weight of a bond he never expected to form. As he tells his tale, people sense he is holding back something heartbreakingly real, something he is afraid the world is not ready to hear, yet impossible for him to forget. Ethan, the quiet rancher of the western frontier, lived far from towns, noise, and human touch. Yet everyone who knew him sensed there was a storm behind his calm eyes. He worked alone, ate alone, and rode across empty plains, with only the wind beside him. No one understood why he chose isolation, but deep inside, he carried memories he refused to share. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ragged hills, a strange tension settled over his ranch, a feeling so heavy that even his horses grew restless. Ethan felt it, too, a warning he couldn't explain, as if the land itself was whispering danger. He stepped outside, scanning the dusk, unaware that this night would tear apart everything he believed about safety, trust, and survival. What waited for him beyond that fading light would test his heart and courage in ways he had never imagined, pulling him toward a destiny he could not escape. As the uneasy silence of the evening tightened around Ethan, he felt the faintest tremor in the ground beneath his boots, a subtle vibration that didn't belong to the wind or the settling night. And before he could make sense of it, a sharp rustle cut through the darkness, like a warning he had no time to answer. His hand reached for the rifle inside his cabin, but a swift shadow crossed his path. Then another, then a third, each moving with such precision that he couldn't even tell if they were human or something else entirely. And when he took a step back, a cold whisper of air brushed past his neck as if someone had passed dangerously close. He steadied his breathing, trying to see through the gloom, but the night felt alive, thick with hidden shapes that watched him without blinking. As the moon slipped behind a drifting cloud, he realized he was no longer alone. A sudden thud hit the ground near him, not loud but heavy enough to signal that whoever had come for him was already in control. He cut it out, hoping for an answer. A sign, anything, yet only silence replied. A silence so deep it pressed against his chest. Then, from the shadowed edge of the corral, a figure stepped forward, tall, poised, and unmistakably female. Her posture firm, her presence commanding, and Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Before he could speak, two more figures appeared beside her, their movements so synchronized that they seemed connected by something ancient and unbreakable. Ethan tried to remain calm, but his pulse raced as he sensed a quiet authority in their stance, a strength that did not need words. He opened his mouth to question them, to bargain, to defend himself. But one of the women raised her hand with a swift, decisive gesture that froze him in place. She didn't touch him, yet he felt the weight of her warning like a grip on his shoulder. Another woman circled behind him, her footsteps silent, her gaze unreadable, and Ethan understood that he was surrounded long before he had stepped outside. He felt the growing fear, reminding himself he had survived harsh winters, broken bones, wild storms, and nights that tried to swallow him whole. But this was different. This was calculated, deliberate, and impossibly calm, as if they had studied him, tracked him, and chosen this exact moment to strike. A soft chant began somewhere in the darkness, low and steady, echoing through the empty plains with a haunting rhythm that made the air feel colder. Ethan tried to pinpoint its source, but the sound seemed to move, drifting around him like a living thing, rising and falling with a pulse that made his throat tighten. The woman in front of him stepped closer, her eyes reflecting a mixture of strength and something deeper, something he couldn't identify. She spoke a single word in a language he didn't understand, and before he could react, a sudden blur of motion wrapped around him, firm hands gripping his arms, guiding him backward into the night. His breath hitched, his vision swirled, and the last thing he saw before everything faded was the moon breaking free from the clouds, shining down on the silent figures who had come for him with purpose, precision, and a fate he could neither resist nor comprehend. Ethan's senses slowly returned as a faint glow pressed against his eyelids, and when he opened them, he found himself lying on a woven mat inside a wide, circular shelter made of branches and reddish earth. Its roof held together with patterns that looked both artistic and ancient, and for a moment he couldn't tell if he was dreaming or trapped in a memory he didn't understand. A soft crackle reached him from a small fire in the center, sending thin trails of smoke toward an opening high above. And as the modest warmth touched his skin, he realized someone had removed his boots and set them neatly beside him. An unexpected gesture that stirred confusion rather than comfort. He pushed himself upright, still dizzy, and through the open doorway he noticed a sprawling valley hidden between steep cliffs, alive with colors the outside plains never carried, and scattered across it were dozens of shelters similar to the one was in. Figures moved between them, each with purpose, each with a quiet grace that made the entire place feel like a world untouched by time. When Ethan tried to stand, a soft rattle of beads announced the presence of the woman who had led the group the night before. She appeared at the doorway, her expression firm yet not unkind, and though she didn't speak, her gaze held him still more effectively than any rope. She stepped aside, signaling for him to follow, and despite his uncertainty, he obeyed, drawn by a mix of fear and the strange calmness that seemed to settle over the valley. Outside, he noticed the tribe's members watching him with unreadable expressions. Not hostile, but cautious, as if trying to decide what kind of man he was before allowing him to take another step. The scent of herbs drifted through the air, carried by women who were preparing bowls filled with mixtures he didn't recognize, and nearby, others tended to horses marked with ornate symbols. Ethan felt an ache in his chest as he realized he was deep in a land no map had ever shown, surrounded by people who moved with unity so strong it seemed sacred. The leader guided him toward a raised platform overlooking the valley, and when he reached it, she finally spoke in clear, slow English, telling him that he had entered a protected sanctuary known only to their lineage, a place where no outsider had ever been allowed. Her voice carried neither anger nor softness, just truth delivered with the weight of responsibility. Ethan listened, trying to understand why he had been brought here, but she offered no explanation, only a careful study of his face, as though searching for something she hoped to find. As the wind swept through the camp, lifting dust in gentle spirals, Ethan felt the full reality settle upon him. He was far from home, cut off from everything familiar, yet surrounded by a community whose secrets ran deeper than he could imagine, and whatever path waited for him here had already begun shaping his destiny long before he opened his eyes. Ethan stood silent as the leader's steady eyes measured something deep within him, and before he could gather his thoughts, she turned away, expecting him to follow her down a narrow path that wound through the heart of the valley. And although every instinct urged him to resist, he walked after her, aware that any refusal might shatter the fragile calm that held him together. The morning light revealed more details of the settlement. From carved stones, placed with deliberate care, two woven banners fluttering softly between wooden posts, and as he moved through the camp, different women paused their tasks to observe him, not with hostility, but with an alert curiosity that made him feel both vulnerable and strangely acknowledged. When the leader stopped near a shaded area where tools lay scattered beside an old wooden frame, she gestured for him to repair a broken piece, an instruction that surprised him enough to forget his fear. He knelt beside the frame, examined the damage, and began working with steady hands, grateful for a task that reminded him of home. As he shaped the wood, a few women approached, watching the careful precision in his movements and their guarded expressions soften slightly. Recognizing skill they did not expect from an outsider, one of them placed a water bowl beside him, without a word, an act so simple yet meaningful that it struck him more deeply than he anticipated. Throughout the day, he continued helping wherever he was led, mending straps, adjusting saddles, and calming a restless horse that had been kicking its stall. And each time he succeeded, the tension around him eased a little more. By evening, whispers moved gently through the camp, carrying quiet approval from those who had seen his effort. And although the leader remained reserved, she no longer looked at him as a threat, but as someone capable of respect. Ethan noticed the shift as clearly as the changing light, and a strange warmth settled in his chest. A fragile sense of belonging he had not felt in years. Yet beneath the growing acceptance, he sensed an underlying sorrow in the tribe. A heaviness in their eyes that suggested wounds he could not yet name. When he returned to the shelter they had assigned to him, he found a small meal waiting, prepared with care but placed without any expectation of gratitude, and the gesture humbled him more than any chains could have. As he ate, in silence, the low hum of distant voices drifted through the camp, blending with the soft rhythm of crackling fires, and he realized that the valley was not merely a refuge, but a living sanctuary bound by unspoken rules and unbreakable bonds. Lying back on the woven mat, he stared at the ceiling, the patterns above him illuminated by the faint flicker of orange light, and for the first time since arriving, he felt a subtle shift inside himself, a quiet surrender to a world he had never imagined, yet could no longer deny. The day had begun with caution, but it ended with a fragile thread of trust forming between him and the people who held his fate, and though uncertainty still loomed, Ethan sensed that something within the tribe had opened just enough to let him breathe, just enough to let him stay. Ethan lay awake long after the fires dimmed, listening to the soft rise and fall of distant voices, and when dawn finally brushed the valley with pale light, he stepped outside to find the leader standing near the entrance, her expression unreadable yet calmer than before, as if the night had given her a reason to trust him a little more. She gestured for him to follow, and he walked beside her, noticing how the morning air carried a gentler rhythm now, a subtle sign that the atmosphere around him was beginning to shift. As they moved through the camp, several women greeted the leader with respectful nods, but their eyes drifted toward Ethan with a different kind of attention, one touched with curiosity and something softer that surprised him. When a young woman approached carrying a stack of woven blankets, her hands trembled slightly as she offered him one, and though she tried to hide it, Ethan sensed her uncertainty melting into a quiet admiration the moment he thanked her with genuine kindness. Later, while helping repair a saddle near the stables, he noticed another woman watching him from across the yard, her gaze thoughtful, almost protective, as if she had already decided he was no longer a danger but someone worth understanding. The horses seemed to sense the change as well, responding to his touch with unusual calm, and one of the older caretakers gave him a small nod of approval, a gesture that carried more weight than spoken praise. As the sun climbed higher, the leader asked him to assist her with distributing medicinal herbs, and during the task he caught glimpses of the tribe's unspoken struggle-starred faces, old scars, and careful smiles that appeared only when he approached with quiet respect. With each interaction, Ethan felt the walls around these women slowly lowering, revealing fragments of warmth hidden beneath layers of strength and caution, and though he didn't fully understand the emotions stirring between them, he sensed a bond forming, delicate yet undeniable. In the afternoon, a sudden argument erupted between two younger women over a broken tool, and before tensions escalated, Ethan stepped forward to fix it, his calm presence dissolving the conflict as quickly as it began. The gratitude in their eyes lingered longer than expected, carrying a tenderness he had not seen before. When evening approached, the leader invited him to share the main fire for the first time, a rare honor that sent murmurs through the circle, and as he sat among them, the flickering flames reflected a mixture of respect, curiosity, and a growing affection that made his chest tighten with an emotion he had not felt in years. The women spoke softly around him, their laughter easing the weight of the long day, and Ethan found himself smiling without meaning to, realizing that the fear which once held him captive had been replaced by something far more complicated, something both comforting and dangerous. As the firelight danced across their faces, he understood that the hearts around him were shifting, opening in ways he had never expected, and with that realization came the quiet truth that his own heart was beginning to change with them, step by step, without permission, without warning, and without any way to turn back now. Asterisk. As the last sparks of the evening fire faded into glowing embers, Ethan felt an uneasy stiffness in the air, a shift so subtle that only someone who had begun to understand the heartbeat of the valley could notice, and when he glanced at the leader, he saw a tension in her posture that hadn't been there before, a stillness sharpened by instinct rather than fear. Moments later, a young scout rushed into the circle, breathless, eyes wide. And though she spoke in her native tongue, the urgency in her voice needed no translation. The leader rose immediately, her expression tightening as she listened, and the women around her straightened with the calm focus of seasoned warriors preparing for something inevitable. Ethan felt a chill spread across his chest as he realized they were not gathering for a ritual or task, but responding to a threat that had pierced the valley's hidden safety. Without warning, the leader turned to him, her voice low and steady, as she told him a hostile group had been tracking their supplies for weeks, waiting for the right moment to strike, and now they were moving closer than ever before. The quiet acceptance he had earned felt suddenly fragile, hanging in the balance as the camp erupted into swift, disciplined motion, with women grabbing weapons, securing children inside shelters, and forming defensive lines with practiced precision. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, torn between fear and the growing loyalty he felt toward these people who had begun trusting him despite every reason not to. The leader approached him again, her eyes reflecting a mixture of resolve and something almost protective, and she offered him one final choice: flee alone while the cliffs were still open, or stay and face the danger beside them. The words lingered heavily between them, and Ethan felt his heartbeat thundering in his ears as memories of his old life flashed through his mind: the lonely ranch, the silent meals, the empty night sand. Then he looked around at the women, who had shown him acceptance he never expected, and the answer rose within him without struggle. He told her he would not run. A moment of stillness passed, deep and meaningful, before she nodded and handed him a simple wooden spear, the same kind used by the youngest warriors, not as a sign of weakness, but as a symbol of trust. The valley grew darker as a cloud slid across the moon, and distant footsteps echoed between the cliffs, heavy, uneven, and growing louder with every breath. Ethan positioned himself between the shelters and the approaching shadows, trying to steady his grip as the leader signaled. Silence. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then the first hostile figure emerged from the rock's edge, followed by others moving in broken lines, their intentions clear in their movements. Ethan felt a surge of fear, but it was quickly swallowed by determination, fueled by the memory of every act of kindness the tribe had shown him. As the enemy advanced, the leader whispered a command that rippled through the warriors, and the valley transformed from a quiet sanctuary into a battlefield of whispering tension. The clash was moments away, the air tight with destiny, and Ethan knew that whatever happened next would shape not only his life, but the future of the tribe that had pulled him into their world, with bonds stronger than he had ever imagined. As the first clash of steel echoed through the valley, Ethan fought beside the women with a resolve he never knew he carried. And when the final attacker fell and silence returned, the leader looked at him with a depth that spoke of gratitude and sorrow intertwined, a silent acknowledgement that he had changed the fate of their hidden world. Yet before he could speak, she stepped closer and told him that his life beyond the cliffs was calling again, that the valley would close to outsiders until the spirits allowed otherwise, and though her voice remained steady, he heard the ache beneath it. When dawn broke, the tribe gathered to bid him farewell, their eyes reflecting a bond carved by danger and trust. And as Ethan walked toward the narrow pass, he glanced back one last time, knowing he was leaving a part of himself behind. Te? Wind carried a single whisper from the leader, a promise that their paths would cross again when destiny was ready.